Hi, thank you for joining us today for the webinar on Title 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll also talk about homelessness and foster care today. This is a webinar or a training that was presented in January of 2020, but we wanted you all to have an opportunity to hear some of the information. So it's being recorded in parts, and this part again is going to focus on helping you to understand the differences in allowability with the different title programs. And I'm Tracie Sweet, the Director of Federal Programs at the South Carolina Public Charter School District, and I'll be your host today. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. We're going to first be talking about Title I. Title I is probably the most well-known title program of them all. It is the one in which our district receives the most funding, and it focuses on improving student achievement for all students. Schools qualify as a Title I school based on their poverty percentage of students who are on free and reduced lunch. The higher your poverty percentage, the more likely you are to be eligible to become a Title I school. Schools must have at least a 40% poverty percentage based on the free and reduced lunch in order to be considered. Currently, in our school district, we serve all schools that are eligible. By state rules and regulations and federal rules and regulations, we must serve those schools that are at a 75% or more poverty percentage. But our philosophy in the district currently is to serve as many schools as possible, and right now we have enough funding to cover all of our Title I schools. All right, so let's jump into what it means to be a Title I school and some of the uses of funds. All of our schools choose to become school-wide programs as a Title I school. That means that the educational program, the funds are to be used for the educational program to upgrade the educational experiences for all students, not just those that are in poverty. So as you can see here on the screen, we have some examples, some ways in which funding can be used through Title I. I won't read all of these. You can always pause this webinar at any time to take a deeper look, but I do want to share some of these and talk about how our district currently uses a lot of these funds. Increased learning time is one way. We do see a lot of activities coming through for programs such as extended school day, those after school programs, and then also summer school. I've also seen some opportunities for bridge programs where you are introducing students to another grade level, maybe from an elementary school to a middle school, programs like that to help them be successful. High quality preschool or full day kindergarten, evidence-based strategies to accelerate the acquisition of content knowledge for English learners. You're going to see that all of our programs do have some component that addresses our English learners. I'll talk a little more about that when I get to our Title III program. School climate interventions, we do see a lot of things that focus on a lot of activities that focus on improving climate interventions, school behavior programs such as PBIS, the Positive Behavior Intervention System, things like that. In the past, a lot of our districts across the state, when I was working at the State Department, had the idea that you could only use Title I funds to focus on reading and math. But that is not the case. If you can show a need, a demonstrated need based on data, there are a lot of ways in which you can use Title I funds. Title I is based on a needs assessment, and the activities that are created in the plans in which funding is used must be based on that needs assessment. Okay, equipment, materials, all of those kinds of things to help struggling students and drive decision making. Those are also activities that are allowed. Devices and software for students to access digital learning materials is another area. Now you can see a much more extensive list here. This is not by any means the end-all example or a list of examples for you. We can be very creative in helping to improve the educational academics of our students. And as long as we can show a need and activities and amounts are reasonable and necessary, then we do have a lot of flexibility here. So you can see a lot of different activities here. Again, that extended school day, school year. We see a lot of professional development opportunities in some of our activities and so forth. Additional staff such as reading, math coaches. I've also seen behavioral interventionists and so forth. Okay, so again, you can always pause this to see that complete list there. And again, that is not a exhaustive list, but it is a list of examples. All right, we'll move into Title II. Most of you have probably heard of Title II. All of our schools receive Title II funding, and Title II is intended to improve our teachers' experience through high quality professional development, and not just our teachers, but also some of our school leaders as well. Here's a list of Title II uses of funds. You'll see, of course, the professional development, effective teaching of English language learners. Again, that is something you're going to see throughout all of the programs. Effective teaching of children with disabilities, increased knowledge or ability to teach early childhood. You see information there regarding STEM. So basically, this program is designed to help upgrade the quality of our instruction in the classroom. Okay. Here's some other items that you can see. Instructional services provided by libraries, which is something new. So our librarians are allowed to be funded for conferences and so forth. Training to recognize or prevent sexual abuse. You'll see that we also have a new program that's this is its third year, and that's Title IV that focuses on programs around the safe and healthy schools. So that training to recognize and prevent sexual abuse also fits into Title IV. Career readiness and education, I see lots of things around recruitment, placement, and retention of effective teachers, recruiting and retaining effective teachers and making sure that we offer incentives for them to stay in the classroom. Recruiting individuals from other fields, so giving them opportunities to move from one field to another, reducing class size, and then some other evidence-based activities. Again, all activities must be based on a need, and they must be evidence-based activities. All right, we'll move on to Title III. Title III is the program that's used to ensure that English learners attain English language proficiency and meet state academic standards. We don't receive a lot of funding in this area, but we do spread that out across all schools, because all schools, regardless of whether they receive funding or not, are required to meet standards, and there are certain rules and regulations that they have to carry out in order to be prepared, even if they do not currently have English learners, but they do have to be prepared to serve those students in the event that students move in. So I've seen a lot of our schools using this funding this year to send teachers to professional development and looking at planning to be able to meet the needs of students who do move in who may meet this criteria. You can see here Title III use of funds, some allowable activities versus some non-allowable activities. Basically, Title III funds can be used to improve the instructional program for English learners. Some of the things we cannot do, however, is pay for translation or interpretation, because that is a requirement under the law. All schools are required to provide translation and interpretation, and therefore it would be supplanting if we used Title III funds to pay for that. So again, I wanted to mention something regarding supplanting. All activities and all of these Title I funds must be and all of the federal funds must be in addition to required components of your program. So if there is something that you are required to do by law, you would not be able to use any Title I funds for that particular program. So you have to think about, in the absence of these funds, would you be required to do whatever activity it is that you're thinking about? This is the good example of interpretation. Since you are required by law to provide that, it would not be supplemental, it would be supplanting. So all activities must be supplemental to what you are already required to do. So in other words, above and beyond what you're required to give our students an opportunity to excel. All right, and finally, Title IV program is the one that I was mentioning that was relatively new, It has three different, oh, back up. It's the SSAE grant, which stands for Student Support and Academic Enrichment. And it has three different areas that we have to focus on. One has to do with well-rounded students, one with student safety and health, and then the third area has to do with technology and ways in which you implement some of the programs. I'll talk a little more about each category. The well-rounded category has to do with providing opportunities for our students to become well-rounded individuals. Some examples are STEM programs and materials. I'll jump over to the right side where you see music curriculum, foreign language programs, the arts programs, and of course family literacy and community literacy programs. So again, the well-rounded category is kind of above and beyond what we would offer as a basic program for our students. Here are some other examples, such as summer school and after-school programs that revolve around STEM and the arts. So again, you see social and emotional learning curriculum, PBIS coaches, guidance counselors. Keep in mind what I just said about supplemental versus supplanting. Guidance counselors in this case would be in addition to what is already required. So you could possibly hire a guidance counselor to give additional services beyond the requirement of the state. The next category has to do with safe and healthy schools, and you can see here that it's divided into two different areas, safe and supportive schools, and then student physical and mental health. So there's a list of some cross-cutting topics that go across both safe and supportive schools and student physical and mental health there. One of the issues with the first two categories that I mentioned in Title IV is that you have to spend at least 20% of your allocations on each of these categories. So 20% in well-rounded and 20% in safe and healthy schools. The remaining amount that you have left over after you spend at least 20% in each of these two categories can be used for things like technology and technology training. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. Again, I don't think I mentioned that the Title IV program is allocated, or the Title IV funds are allocated to schools that have high poverty percentages. And so for us, for this year, that would be all of our Title I schools. So if you're a Title I school, you also receive Title IV funding. It's not a lot of money, but it does help. We had some of our schools who chose to use some of the funding for PBIS. They've used it for paying additional resource officers to be on campus, relationship building, programs for preventing bullying and harassment. So you can see there's an entire list there of things that it can be used for. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about the third category. Remember that I said you have to spend at least 20% of your funds on the well-rounded category, at least 20% of your funds on the safe and healthy schools category, and then the remaining funding can be used in the area of technology. However, there is a statement that reads that no more than 15% of the funds for activities to support the effective use of technology may be used for purchasing technology infrastructure. So that means basically that, let's say you spend 20% in well-rounded, you spend 20% in safe and healthy schools, you have 60% left over. Only 15% of that 60% that's remaining can be used on actual technology infrastructure, such as iPads, computers, and so forth. They like to see the majority of that money being spent on training programs or professional development, teaching our educators how to use the technology. Okay, so there's that little special caveat there. All right, and that takes care of our title programs 1, 2, 3, and 4, just to give you an idea of how they're different. I also wanted to mention McKinney-Vento and foster care. Both of these funding opportunities fall under Title I, and regardless of whether you receive Title I funding or not, McKinney-Vento and foster care rules and regulations apply to you. So what I want to mention here is that we're going to have some upcoming, more detailed webinars to send out to you regarding homelessness and foster care. But in the meantime, I just want to give you kind of an overall idea of how this is being handled and some of your responsibilities as a school. McKinney-Vento, of course, is the law related to homelessness. As a district, we are required to set aside funding for homelessness, again, for all schools, regardless of whether you're Title I or not. So if you have a student in your school who qualifies as homelessness, there are certain things that we can do to help. The areas in which we can help involve items that would help to increase the student achievement of the student, such as an after-school program, or if the student needs items such as uniforms, if you require a uniform, those can be purchased through our homeless program. We also have, I know an individual case that was mentioned recently had to do with a student in an online school who did not have access to wireless access at home, and so we were able to provide that for the student. So if you do have a situation, it is handled on a case-by-case basis. Please contact me, Tracie Sweet, and I will give you some more information. I have a form that you can complete that shows how the school has looked into other funding opportunities, and then also some areas in which you can request funding from our Title I plan to be used to help the student. So again, contact me if you have any questions regarding students who may qualify for homelessness. One other thing I wanted to mention about homelessness is that sometimes when we think about students who are homeless, we think about those students who have been displaced and do not have a place to call home, and they may be living on the streets. That is not always the case. We have students who are doubled up with families. Maybe they were displaced from their home and they're living with a grandmother and grandfather, the entire family. They are still considered homelessness, and they do qualify for the services. So there are lots of different areas there. If you have questions, please let me know. Okay, let's talk about foster care just a little. So foster care students are being protected under the Title I rules and regs as well. When ESSA passed in 2015, foster care was a new area that was incorporated into our plan as a state and as required by the federal government. Basically what the law says is that if a student enters into foster care or moves from one foster care to another, and it could possibly initiate a change of school, then the law actually says that a student must remain in his or her current school unless it is not in that student's best interest. Well, that initiates what we call a best interest determination. And in short, we call it a bid. So if you have a student who enters into foster care or moves from one foster care to another, please contact me because as a district, we are required to do a bid to determine what is in that student's best interest. It is a joint venture between the school and also the local DSS office, or in some cases, it may be a DSS office in another area, depending on where that student originated from. But there are a lot of factors to consider when determining what's in a student's best interest. One of the most obvious is distance and how far that student would have to travel to come to school. There are lots of other factors, including, some examples people don't always think about would be the student's schedule. Would they be able to continue to receive the credits that they need to graduate on time if they move? Relationships, safety is the biggest issue to consider. And then there are lots of others that we can talk about whenever if you have a situation that necessitates a bid. Another area we have to think about when it comes to foster care is transportation. Regardless of whether your school provides transportation for all students, if the student remains in your school, then the school would be responsible for providing transportation for that student, or the local welfare agency would be responsible. So basically what the law says there is that if there is a cost involved in transporting the student to the school in which he or she currently is attending, then either the school district pays for it or the DSS agency pays for it, or there is a split between the two. They decide how they want to split that up. Again, this is handled on a case-by-case basis, so we can't just have a flat statement that says who's going to do what. It really depends on the situation, and people are encouraged to look for no-cost, low-cost options when considering transportation. So again, if you have a situation, please contact me, and we will work through that. I'll help you. I'll be your liaison for that. The other thing you want to consider in foster care is the law that states if a student does move from their current school district, they must be immediately enrolled in the school district in which they are zoned in order for there not to be a loss of educational opportunities for the student. So this whole law, the basics of this whole law is providing educational stability for students in foster care, making sure they don't miss any educational opportunities. So again, please give me a call and we will work through all of those issues. All right, well, I appreciate you joining me to give you an idea, just an umbrella overall idea of how all of these programs are different. Please feel free to contact me if you have questions. I am, again, Tracie Sweet, the Director of Federal Programs. You can reach me at 803-960-8609, or you can email me at tsweet@scharter.org. Thank you and have a wonderful day.